Hi, everybody. This is Donna Reed coming to you from the Cactus Lounge. I traveled in Up with People in 1976. I was in Cast A, and many of you who watch these already know that and know way more about me than you probably need to know. So today, my guest is Brett Battles, and I've started having people put their cast years on here so you can see he traveled in C of 81 and A of 82. Welcome, Brett. Thank you
Thank
for
you. Thanks for
joining.
having me.
Yeah. So you are someone that I know nothing about. I
Yeah.
um I think we became, sometimes I know people, right?
Right.
And or I've hung out with them and I know their kids and grandkids. I don't know anything about you except that we became Facebook friends and you have a lot of stuff behind you. So I'm seeing
Oh yeah. This is my
what
office.
looks like a Lego R2D2 and is that Legos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So, tell everybody where you live right now, but then go back and tell us where you were when you saw an Up With People show, how you got
Sure.
involved in Up With People.
Sure. Um, I currently live now in Ventura County in the small town of Fillmore, just north of Los Angeles,
Okay.
after spending most of my adult years in LA. But I
Okay.
grew up out um, from the age of like 8 until 19, or until I joined up with people in the middle of the Mojave Desert at a China Lake Ridgecrest. China Lake is a Navy weapons center out in the middle of the desert, and Ridgecrest is the town around it. And so we lived part in,
Wow.
and then in the later years in the other. And that's where I saw Up with People for the first time. We hosted um, a couple of people then, and then that's when I tried out and got in.
So the middle of the Mojave Desert, but Up With People did a show there, wherever.
Right. Well, it's the right
Yeah.
size, 25,000 people, so it's the sweet
Yeah.
spot I think for Up with People. So
Yeah,
totally.
it was. That's funny because I'm from a tiny town of about 500, but our school town about 20,000.
Yeah,
Yeah, where the high school was and stuff.
as long as there's
So,
about that much around, I think that was the
yeah.
target.
Yeah. So then did you see a show in 1980 or 79 or
No,
like
it was 1980. So I graduated high school in 80.
okay.
And then I think I don't remember exactly when the show was, but I think it was, I'm going to say the fall or w early winter. Uh,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was the fall. And then I interviewed after that show and
Okay.
waited for to hear for
And waited to hear. Okay. Okay.
yeah,
And then went the following summer, I
I
assume.
did.
Okay.
Yes, exactly right.
And did you stage then here in Tucson?
I did. I was in Tucson both years. Um,
Okay.
uh, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I did costumes for 3 years, and I'm trying to
Hmm.
remember 78, 79. It may
We
not have been,
Yeah,
might
we
not have
were
been 81.
encore. We were encore with the poofy shirts and
The one that
the
looks like Robin Williams when he's like being a pirate, that one.
yes. That's us.
Okay. Were those bodysuits too?
They were. Of course they were.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
don't want them to come untucked while you're doing the
No,
swings.
they're like
Yeah. Yeah.
flapping around in that blue polyester or whatever
Right.
color
Right.
it was. So,
Ours
all
were ours
right,
were ours were rust and
you're
brown and yellow and
that's right. They had
that
switched to
kind of
those golds
yeah.
from all rusts
Yeah.
and golds from all the blues. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
I was fine with that though, actually. I was
You were good with that?
yeah,
Okay.
I was okay with that.
So you traveled 2 years. Did you
I
come back the
did.
second year as a staff member then?
I did. I was stage manager and truck driver for my
Ah.
second year.
So when you joined the organization, you came in, did you come in because you liked music or dancing or the whole idea of
I was,
service?
I mean, I dancing. No, I was never a dancer. But I was a theater kid in high school.
Okay.
I was president of the drama club. I was in all the plays and the musicals and things we did. And I
Okay.
think it was I and I was going to community college at the time
Okay.
there in our town. I was still kind of floundering with what to do next, with
Okay.
18.
Okay.
At that time, I was 18, and by the time I showed up in Tucson, I was 19. And I think my
Okay.
parents were like, "Well, maybe this is something you'll be interested in." And so they
Yeah.
hosted, and that it turned out to be something I was interested in. So it worked out.
And did your time on the road then affect your decisions about what was next?
Um, affect the decisions. I think perhaps, but not necessarily in a direct way. I mean, I grew up a lot, I think, while
Yeah.
being on the road, and to the point where I was felt more than capable to take care of myself and
Right. Right.
and um, and just go out in the world because I eventually after up with people though I almost immediately I moved to LA for about a year and worked and then I came back home for a year to make some money and then I went back to LA to go
LA.
to university and
Okay.
I didn't leave LA until 2019 basically except for a couple
Wow.
of years in the middle.
So
Um,
where'd you finish university? What'd you
I was
graduate?
at Cal State near Northridge,
Okay.
and my degree is in radio, television, film,
Oh,
emphasis on film more than anything. And then I worked in television for about 20 years.
in the
Um,
production side of things?
I worked in, yes, sort of. I worked as a uh, producer within television graphics, which is like IDs, commercials, some the lower third graphics, and all the graphics you see like on news programs and TV programs and opening titles for TV shows.
Oh,
I would work with the designers and the directors who did that and so I was like a project manager for that. And my last job, I was at E Entertainment. I was executive producer in the on-air design group. Um, and I left that in 2008 when I became full-time writer at that point. So,
so you, I think about this because I have a client who she started with, I want to say AT&T. I can't remember. And she's like 70 something now. And
uh,
the changes that she saw over the years. So clearly from the early 80s till now, when you started in graphics,
mhm.
then what were the tools that you were doing? Were you hand doing
No, they
things?
were, and again, I wasn't the artist. There
Okay.
were other people who handled it.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't draw myself out of a box if I wanted to, I don't think. But I understand design and because of all those years in it now, which is great. I love that.
Hmm.
I learned
Hmm.
that. Yes, the tools that when I really got into that industry around I mean, after school, I graduated in '88, and then I had like a year that I worked at a small television studio where we did People's Court with Judge Wapner and all that stuff. So I
I
was
remember
pulling,
those.
yeah, I was pulling cables for those shows, and then I got into the into this, just kind of fell into this company that did this other stuff. And in the beginning, we had very few computers in the office.
Okay.
And there was some design work done by hand, but not really a lot. We would go to a post-production studio and have to pay hundreds of dollars an hour to use these machines. There was a thing called Paintbox, which was like this big computer kind of thing where they can just
Yeah.
paint stills. And then we would use at that time, I think it was just there was these two animating systems, and they were like hundreds of thousands of dollars these systems, and very expensive to rent like 1,000 plus an hour or whatever. But it was like the first one was called a Harry, and then later came the Henry, um, and then by the time somewhere in the 90s, later 90s, that began to shift. And,
Yeah.
and people, and actually, even in the early 90s, more of the designers started to get um, computers on their desks. So because then they could do, if nothing else, we could do the type on the computer, different typefaces and
Yeah.
everything. Because before that, we'd have to send it out to a typesetter to do it or something like that, and then
Wow.
shoot it on a camera. But then we were able to, move to that, and then eventually got to the point where they're doing all the animations. When I was at E, um, all the animations, the lower thirds, the bug that's in the corner of the screen that sometimes animates and everything. That was just done by our designers at their desk on their Macs. That
That,
was it
yeah,
was a whole different from where I started to where it was
right.
when I left the industry. It was quite a
Yeah.
change.
That's I think about that when I think about being in high school and like choosing a career or what you want to go to college for. I don't even understand some of the categories now that kids pick
Right,
for their
right,
for their career. And in the late 90s, I had a company back in Ohio. It was called Just Be Claus, and it was a magnetic Santa Claus that you dressed up in different football gear and stuff like that.
right.
I wanted it all American made. I had it made in Ohio. Magnets were expensive to ship. It was all this stuff, but I had a website, but it wasn't a website where you could order from the website.
Well,
And
I didn't have that back then.
no,
Yeah,
and the design work that somebody did for me. I paid her a lot of money to use whatever program she used. I can't remember.
sure.
So just thinking about that because I still own this patent. I still own the right to this company. And I'm like, God, it would be so much easier now, you know,
A lot easier now,
to
of course,
create these. Yeah.
of
So
course.
now you mentioned the writing, and I did just see, I think I told you that I just had a book published, but you just
Oh,
had, I don't know how many you've done, but you mentioned, okay, and then I went into writing full time, and that was just kind of so what have you written and what
I
evoked that
I
transition?
am, well, I always wanted to be a writer since I was in fifth grade. That was the big
Ah,
thing I always wanted to do. Um, and it just took me a long time to get there, I think. I published my first book with Random House in 2007,
okay.
and I had a three-book deal with them. My second book came out in 2008. I'd already finished writing the third book. They gave me a new contract that allowed me to try to write full time. I figured I could eke it out for like 2 to 3 years and see what happened.
Yeah.
And so in the fall of 2008 or in September 2008, I quit and started writing full time. And a week later, Lehman Brothers crash and everything, all this stuff happened with the economy. But I had my contract, and in essence, I haven't looked back. There was a few bumps in the road, but I've been full time writing since 2008.
Wow.
I have I think we counted the other day, 47 books now. I now write I write some people will probably have heard of Stuart Woods, the writer Stuart Woods. He recently passed away, and the estate has given me the honor of taking over his series. So I'm writing the Stuart Woods books now.
So what are what's the genre? What are does book one go with book
Thrillers.
two or
I mean, for myself, I started off with spy thrillers, mainly because that's the book that sold. I wrote four books before I sold any, and the third book I wrote was a spy thriller, and that's the one that sold. The
oh,
first one
interesting.
was like a fantasy. The second one was a sci-fi. The third one was just a lit novel. I mean, fourth one was a lit novel, but I sold the spy one. And back those days, and to a certain set now, if you go strictly traditional, you get pigeonholed into whatever category that you've sold in. And so
Yeah.
I was a thriller writer, with a penchant for spy thrillers, there at the beginning. But after my five books with Random
Random
House,
House.
I went independent, and because ebooks and everything came along, and I was able to do that and actually make a lot more than I did when I was with Random House. And I did science fiction. I did well, several different types of
Yeah.
science fiction. I did more thrillers. I did some that weren't spy, and then now I'm back. I still do my independent books, but I'm now back with traditional publishing, doing the Stuart Woods books. Yeah, so that's it.
Wow. So I'm going to ask you some questions based on the fact that I have just published a book, hired a publisher. I didn't self-publish. Um, you say I didn't make any money until the third one, right? And yet,
I mean, I made money on the first three books. I just didn't make enough money to quit my
that,
job.
okay, that's
It was my second I had a contract for three books, and then I
yeah.
had a contract for two books that was a lot more, that was four times as much as they paid me for the three books. Now,
Wow.
I still got royalties for these three books
Hmm.
afterwards. So that was great. But because I was an unknown quantity
Right.
at that point,
Yeah.
I got just the smaller amount for the first three, and then I was able to translate that into one that was large enough that I thought I could make it out for 3 years, and so that's how
Interesting. It's a fascinating world,
it
and
is.
I the publisher that I was talking to said, that I'm working with said, okay, if 500,000 books come out this year, new ones, why is somebody going to buy yours? And I was like, whoa. It's just,
Let
oh,
me ask you a question. Did you did you say you paid your publisher?
I I paid a publisher to get started. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
My advice
Yeah.
would be to never pay a publisher. That
That
is
that's
that
great
is
in hindsight.
yeah. I know, and I'm sorry, but for anybody else who's watching, that is publishers should pay the author. Authors don't pay the publisher.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well, it's definitely a learning experience. They
yeah,
have been some things
absolutely.
that I think they have done very well for me.
Right?
Part part of part of this for me is, do I want to keep writing books? Not necessarily.
Mhm.
Would I like it to work into another arena? Yes, because I'd like it to work into like a TED Talk or some
Uh,
speaking related to
right.
it because of the type of book it is.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, I have tons of, it's like everything. Then you start meeting people who have written books and, the stuff like that. But I don't, I look at what's behind you. I think of the style of what you write. My youngest son, who traveled in 2013, is his degrees are in theater and script writing
Right.
from Northern Arizona University. And he loves those things.
Mhm.
But trying to decide, can I afford to do this as a 37-year-old and not do what I have to do right now to pay the bills, you know?
That's why I had a job for 20. I was 45 when my first book came
Yeah. Yeah.
out. But I
Fascinating.
also, I mean, if you're gonna, if you're a writer and that's really your passion is to be a writer, you
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
And there are people such as yourself who may not want to write multiple books,
Right.
and that's fine too. That's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
But those people who are identify themselves as writers,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
and you just keep writing no matter
Yeah.
whether people are going to read it or not.
So, Stephen King has a book called On Writing, right?
Oh,
I
one
think
of my
that's,
favorites. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, what's your process when you're going to write something? What do you do?
Well, you know, I am writing is my job, so I treat it like a job, and
Okay.
I set aside specific hours every day that I'm doing that because if I don't do that, then I'm never going to get anything done. If I'm treating
Hmm.
it like a hobby, I'll never get anything done.
Right.
And I found that out because my first year when I went full time, I wasted a lot of time doing other things when I should have been writing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I have a habit. I'm an early riser and I always work best first thing in the morning. So I like to go out to a coffee shop to write
Yeah.
because if I write at home, I have too many distractions, as you can see. Um, and I will get nothing done. So I go to a coffee shop. I'm usually there when they open, like 6 a.m. I've
Yeah.
been at coffee shops at 5 a.m. before. And I'll work for several hours and then maybe go to another coffee shop and work, or maybe I'm come home because, even 3 or 4 hours of writing that'll tax your brain after a while. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and there's other things that I can do, like work on, corrections for other books or whatever during the
Right.
day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I set those hours aside and I do that, try to do it 5 days, sometimes more. I've just finishing a stretch now where I basically the only day I've taken off in the last almost 2 months at this point was Thanksgiving.
Wow. I know
Just
setting
because,
this up has been a challenge because of
yeah,
all that you
yeah.
were doing.
Well,
Yeah,
I have a book that just came out on Tuesday.
right.
I had another book that I finished on Tuesday.
Wow.
On that same day, this is we're talking about Tuesday, whatever December, the first Tuesday of December the 3rd.
Yeah.
And then I also have now I have an outline that's I'm already past the deadline on that because I was past the deadline on the delivery of the other book.
Wow.
And so I'm just went straight into doing that. Yeah. So hopefully in the next couple of days I'll finish that and might be able to take a few days off, but then I have to jump right back in and start writing through the holidays. So
So you said that you've been asked to take over for who's the other man that you
Stuart Woods. Hold on, I got
Stuart Woods. So if you've taken over for Stuart Woods, does it mean that you're
Stuart
finishing a
Woods.
series
This
in
guy.
his style? Okay.
Yes. Well, I write two of his series. Um, his main series is his Stone Barrington series. And it has a splinter, what do you call it? An offshoot series, called spin-off series called, or that features another character called Teddy Fay. That's how I first got into it because that spin-off series always had co-writers that he used.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it's about that one's about a former CIA guy who is now a Hollywood producer, and I write spy novels, and I used to work in Hollywood, so it was a night.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
worked out well.
Yeah.
But when I finished that first book, he passed away like 2 weeks after I turned it in, and
Wow.
and then it was like, oh no, what's going to happen? And then they asked me to finish. He had been
Another.
in the middle of writing the next book in his big long main series, which this would be book number 64. Uh,
Wow.
and so he'd only written half, and they asked me to finish it, so I did that, and that was what this one was. This is the first of his big
What's it
series.
called? Near
It's called,
miss?
yeah, that's the first one of that one. But that was like a couple years ago. It Then they asked me to take over the series, so now I am the writer of the of both series.
So by doing that,
Mhm.
there's the books you wrote,
Mhm.
okay, and now you're doing this.
Mhm.
Do you feel like your voice is reflected the same in both of
Oh,
those?
right. Oh, yeah. It's I mean, obviously I have to try to write in his voice, and it is different than my voice.
Okay.
And occasionally I'll get a little bit of myself into them a little bit. I think the longer I go, I'm getting a little bit more, but not, I don't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
stray too much from the path because that's what people love about these books.
Right.
So yeah, there is a difference. I still work on my books. I just can't work on them nearly as much as I used to because
Yeah.
I'm doing
You
these
agreed to
for
do this.
now, and I'll do
Yeah.
this for a few years. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But it's it's giving me a lot of new exposure to new people, so which is good. And
Yeah.
yeah,
How,
that
how
so
interesting.
yeah.
So, have you been active, do you think, with your Up With People cast? Do you stay in touch with people? I mean, what's
Uh,
your connection
uh,
or lack thereof?
I am I have several people that I'm in contact with quite a bit.
Okay.
On the board of directors of a theater group in LA that's run by John Rivera, who was in my first cast. And
Okay.
there's actually three other cast members who are also on the board with us. So like once a month
Wow.
we do Zoom calls and everything just about the group. We don't talk about it with people. We talk about the theater group and everything.
Yeah, that's
We have that
amazing.
connection.
Yeah.
Um, I my friend Mark from my second class, Mark Ortega, actually is rents a room here in my house, so I see him every day.
Well, there's
He's one
that.
of my best friends, so it worked out really well. He was when I moved here. This is his hometown that I've moved to, and because it's close to where my kids live, and he happened to be looking for a place at that time. It was perfect. We moved. So he moved in here too. This is like the third or fourth time since since the 80s, since we got out of Up With People, that we've roomed together. Most of the back in LA and apartments in LA, but it was
Yeah.
just a nice fit. So yeah, I see him every day. We have a couple of friends who come from one from Florida. Well, I guess they're both from Florida, are coming in for just after Christmas to spend a few days. I just did a book signing in Arizona at Poison Pen in uh, uh, Phoenix, Scottsdale,
Oh,
Poison Pen bookstore. And beforehand, I did happy hour with there were three or four other
I wish I had
people.
known you were going to be there because I'm going up Wednesday, and it's funny
Ah,
because that's one of the bookstores that people have been telling me to go to
great bookstore. Great
and to
bookstore.
talk to. That one and
You'll find some of my signed books there if you want.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I
So yeah, I see them all the time. When I've gone to, I took my kids, my daughters to Japan a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, and one day we met up with Tak, who I traveled with, um, and, and he took us around Yokohama, which is great. I took them a couple of years before that. We went to Europe and well, specifically Rome and London. And in Rome, I think we met up with Jana there, who has a house in Rome, but she lives up in Scandinavia. But then when we were in London, we met up with a couple of different people I traveled with. So I always
that's
try to
fun.
meet up with
I,
people.
every I think about the fact that colleges graduate, big colleges
Mhm.
graduate thousands and thousands of people a year. And that on a global level, we have about 23,000 alumni. And at this point, we don't know if there will be more alumni. Like we don't know what if a future or what a future looks like. And there used to be this whole thing about 6 degrees of separation. And I was just back in New York City to see a 78 alum in a Broadway show.
Awesome.
Met the guy that was his understudy and friended him on Facebook. And then that guy just posted, "Hey, I got to direct this other thing with the sister of an alumni who's married to it." And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So when you think about the fact that there's so few of us really globally, it's pretty fascinating. It's what I love about doing these interviews.
Mm.
I encourage you if you can squeeze it in. None of them are longer than 40 minutes. And I now, a couple of people have passed away since I interviewed them. And I love that I have these stories,
Right.
saved and stuff like that. Um, so I before we wrap it up here, I want to ask you a couple questions that I've asked a
Sure.
lot of alumni. Is there any place that you went while you were traveling that you just loved, 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 and you wanted to go back to? Don't say Italy because everybody always says that.
Well, we didn't go to Italy on my
Okay,
trip. We were in Europe, but mostly Northern Europe. So
Scandinavia.
Scandinavia. My first cast, we were there for 5 months in Europe. It was awesome. It was great.
Wow.
Um, and actually ended in Europe and had to fly back. But I mean, I've already been, Switzerland was great, but I've been back to Switzerland. I
Yeah.
haven't been back to Scandinavia, like Sweden. We spent like 2 months at least in Sweden and
Wow.
a couple of weeks in Finland. It was like dead of winter in Finland, but it was awesome. It was so much fun.
If you're going to be there,
Uh,
you might as well be there in the
yeah,
winter.
I would love to go back to those places, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second class, we were in Mexico for almost 3 months. Oaxaca was incredible. Um,
It's an, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was just, I mean, there was a lot of really highlights through all that stuff. Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. And is there a song that rings through your head now and then from Up With People?
Only if somebody else is playing it.
You're not like in the shower singing, you're in the shower
Mm,
writing a book.
no, no. I'm the guy in the back when everyone starts doing their swing claps. I'm going, oh, what are you doing? Stop. No, no, I'm
All
just
right, all right. So tell me from a food standpoint, anything you tasted on the road that you just love, 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 and you think about that again, or that you hated and you will never ever again eat?
I can't remember specifically. I mean, that was 40 years ago. So a lot of the food we had in Mexico was great.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
remember specific. I do know that because of our time in Scandinavia, it permanently changed how I eat food because now
Oh,
I eat with a fork in the left hand and the knife in the right because I
really?
learned that in
Wow.
Sweden. So.
That's interesting.
because it made more sense.
It
it was
does
just
make sense,
logical.
but sometimes it feels like a balancing act of what putting things on your fork and
Yeah, but I don't always put everything on the pork, but
yeah.
it's easier, especially if you're eating meat and stuff, and you don't switch hands after. You just keep it that way. Oh, it's so much better. Makes so much more sense. I'm all
It's
about
such
life.
a simple thing, but it's funny,
Ah,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
think about that. Okay. Behind you, you have many things. I've been looking, you have like a white tiger picture. You have, is that an elephant or a monkey that's like a,
This elephant,
yeah.
oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a little incense thing. You put incense in here. I don't do that here because it would get it all smoky in here. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you have Tigger, you have a
this
variety
was
of things.
this
Yep,
was
yep.
the tiger my father gave me when I in the hospital when I was born. So I
Oh
still
my gosh, how fun. And then
yeah,
your R2D2, that's great.
yeah,
That's great.
my
Uh,
great great grandfather right there. My youngest daughter drew this.
what great perspective.
Yeah,
That's
she
neat.
just got her art degree last May. So
So
from
carrying some of that genetics related to
yes,
art and
yes.
what side of the brain functions the best.
Exactly, exactly right. Exactly
That's
right.
awesome. Well, thank you. I I had been doing a lot of these and then I didn't do any for 3 or 4 months because of my life. I try to post them every couple of weeks. I'll message you and let you know when I post it so that you are aware if you want to
Yeah,
share it. It's usually it's nice for other cast members to know if someone
right,
in their
right, right,
cast.
right.
And Brett, if there's anyone else that you think that you know that could pose an interesting interview, it's really fun to see what alumni have done, you
Sure,
know. Through
absolutely. I'll let you
we
know.
are we are definitely a little subset of the world,
Hmm.
right? You know,
Hmm.
a little bit of everything. And um, when I started this, it was related to the Everyday Hero Awards.
Right,
And how do we decide who an everyday hero is, right? And what they have done. But it's turned into for me just super interesting to meet alumni across the years, across the miles, across the generations, you
right.
know. So anyway, I appreciate it. I'm going
No
to
worries.
stop the recording here
Well,
and
thanks
I'll
for
be
having
right
me.
back with you in one sec.
Okay.